win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
How can we have Britain's Got Talent? A British girl did win.
Yes.
This weekend.
Christmas, her name is.
Yes, Sydney Christmas.
Sydney Christmas.
She's a singer.
Yeah.
I'm guessing she's going to have a Christmas single out.
She's a cruise ship singer and she works in a gym.
First woman to win in 9 years.
Yeah. I mean, I don't watch it anymore.
But some people clearly do. But apparently 5 of the last in the final were not British-born or even live here.
Outrageous.
I know. So why call it Britain's Got Talent?
I know.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
It sums up as well this difference between the British public and most people on the telly.
Yeah.
Because the judges do not notice this lack of British involvement in, or at least if they do notice it, they're not saying anything about it. But the viewers notice the imbalance, and just 4 of the foreign acts made it through to the final in the end. There was a patriotic protest in London on Saturdays, it was described. There was hundreds of thousands of people there. There were Students Against Tyranny were there. There was Tommy Robinson was there, much maligned, divisive figure. But these people would say, we are feeling the need to walk on the streets of this country because we no longer feel we can assert our British identity.
Well, I mean, I think there's a difference between patriotism and xenophobia. And I think patriotism is great, and people like to feel a sense of identity, they feel a sense of belonging, you know, they understand what their flag is for, and they kind of, British values, which we all adhere to. And then there's xenophobia, which is sort of, we hate anyone who's not British. So I think I think that march that we saw at the weekend was actually quite patriotic. I don't think it was xenophobic at all. I think it was a nice sort of... They all seemed very kind of peaceful.
There were
and there wasn't any horrible rhetoric or anything like that. Certainly much less horrible rhetoric than we're used to seeing from the pro-Palestinian marches.
The People's Channel.
This is GBNews and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
It's 11 o'clock. You're with GB News. In a moment, headliners. But first, let's bring you the latest news headlines. And the top story tonight, the Prime Minister and the Labour leader traded blows in the first TV debate of this general election campaign. Going head-to-head, Rishi Sunak claimed Sir Keir Starmer would raid pension pots and hike taxes, telling voters, you name it, Labour will tax it.
Inflation is back to normal, wages are growing, taxes are now being cut. Keir Starmer would put all that progress at risk. He would put up everyone's taxes by £2,000. £2,000 in higher taxes for every working family in our country. After all the hard work and sacrifice we've been through, that's not the right course of action. I don't know why you want to put up people's taxes.
Well, the cost of living also came up in the debate, as did the NHS, which Sir Keir Starmer said is broken as he questioned the Prime Minister's maths around waiting lists.
It's unforgivable what's happened to the NHS, and to come into power for 14 years and leave the NHS in a worse state than when you found it is unforgivable in politics. And Rishi Sunak stood 18 months ago, Janet, and said that those waiting lists, which are now nearly 8 million, he said he'll get them down. He made a promise. He said he'd be held accountable. They were 7.2 million at the time. Now they're 7.5 million. So they've gone up, and that bears down on the NHS.
Well, dividing lines were also drawn when the debate moved on to immigration, with both leaders asked by the host to lower their voices at one point. Rishi Sunak insisting deportation flights would take off to Rwanda, but he told the debate, only if I'm your Prime Minister. He also suggested he'd be willing to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, while Sir Keir Starmer said the UK risked becoming a pariah state if it left. However, the Labour leader went on to tell voters he supported processing migrant claims in third countries if it's possible to do that in compliance with international law. Well, that came as more than 200 migrants arrived in the UK on small boats this morning. 4 vessels made the trip from northern France after 63 people managed to cross yesterday. It takes the total number of illegal migrants who've arrived in the UK so far this year to more than 10,500. That's up 38% on last year. Now, elsewhere on the election campaign trail today, both the Conservative and Labour parties condemned an incident involving Reform's leader Nigel Farage. The new Reform leader was leaving a pub in Essex when he had a milkshake thrown at him. A 25-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of assault. Meanwhile, the Lib Dems were out campaigning as well today. Their issue, social care. And the Scottish National Party condemned Conservative plans to curb visas for migrants. That's a roundup of your latest news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Time now for Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your first look at Wednesday's newspapers with me, Simon Evans, and on my comedian panel tonight, representing the North London Massive, we have Josh Howie and a man who's just massive, Leo Kearse. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Yeah? Feeling good and limber after last night's excursion?
Yeah, well, this was the live Headliners comedy night last night.
Yeah.
We got to actually meet the people out there who watched the show.
I know, dozens of them. Amazing.
Yeah. But they were so happy.
It was lovely, wasn't it? It was. It was genuinely a good atmosphere. You kicked it off, didn't you?
Yeah.
And then you left and went and had a kebab.
Yeah, I was in East London.
Josh held the thing together.
Yeah, but you both smashed it. It was wonderful watching you both do your thing.
It was tremendous, wasn't it? And Andrew Doyle was there in his own persona.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It was a great night. It was fun. Hopefully they're going to do more around the country or whatever. I don't know.
I would hope so. Maybe a tour of America. I think maybe Texas or something like that could be.
Australia. Let's just do it international.
I really would like to roll out populist right-leaning TV channels in America. I think we should take them on. Get into the colleges first. Daily Mail kick us off with our headlines tonight. Fiery Rishi comes out swinging and lands big blows. They got that down quickly. Guardian, leaders clash on migration, tax and NHS in ill-tempered debate. Here once again with the ill behaviour. Financial Times, they have an image. Apparently it says, Indian voters deliver shock to Modi after ruling BJP fails to win majority. But I think the original image was punchier. Mirror, these are all good men. D-Day, 80 years on. Not many of them left now, sadly. Metro, shaky start for sure at Farage. That's a clever pun on having a milkshake chucked in your face. And finally, the Daily Star. Asbo Orcas are just like Kevin the Teenager. I don't know if they were in Clacton as well. Anyway, those were your front pages. So, kicking off our in-depth look is the Daily Mail, Leo.
Yeah, the Daily Mail leads with the debate between Starmer and Rishi, and they say fiery Rishi comes out swinging and lands big blows, making it sound a bit more exciting than it actually was.
It's also like sexual swinging.
Yeah, and big blows. Yeah. It could go either way. Anyway, but the PM has claimed that Keir is plotting a £2,000 tax rise for every family in the UK, and he's hammered Labour on opposition to Rwanda, and instant polls showed that voters judged Sunak the winner. But it's interesting that Rishi says that tax rises were in Labour's DNA, which makes Rishi a Labour leader, I assume.
Absolutely. Well, he's gone against his nature.
Yeah,
you could see it. He's worked hard against his own grain to introduce it. I'm a little bit puzzled by this 2,000. I'm all for a bit of propaganda, and wild claims that can't be established or, verified. But £2,000 per family, it's kind of, it's meaningless, isn't it? Obviously, there's progressive tax rates. Half of people in this country don't even pay tax at the moment, I think. Yeah. Well, they're beneficiaries of the state.
Yeah, so Starmer should have hit back way, way harder on that. But it was just a badly formatted debate. Yeah. Neither of them were given enough time, and especially with Sunak being kind of rude, really, as stepping in. I don't think people like to see that. Yes, he won, but it was like 51% to 49%.
Worked for Donald against Hillary, though.
Yeah, but then that's America, isn't it? And they're all scum. But over here, I just don't know if that kind of stuff works. And I think Starmer, he came back with a few good things, but I don't know if you ever really get enough time to get into it.
This isn't going to make very much difference, is it, compared to having 14 years of Tory rule to judge them on? I mean, it's not... What you are basically seeing is a kind of charisma contest, very much like Nixon, Kennedy and all those famous ones. Where,
except without the charisma.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Well, that's what did for Nixon in those days, wasn't it? They said, but... Is there going to be a BBC one? Is this one of a series? I haven't been paying attention.
Yeah, because they did a GBNews one before, didn't they?
Right.
So, well, just that was only... I don't think that was both of them, though.
Ah, right.
That was just sort of...
and no third party? Obviously too late for Farage to be invited on, or...
I guess not. Well, Lib Dems weren't,
because we had that one with 7 of them on last time, didn't we?
Yeah, that was the big one, yeah. But that was also the deputy leaders, didn't they also have some of that?
Yeah.
I know, I was also interested in the set. It looked very much like Tron.
Yeah.
that was what I got lost in. I was like, this is so sci-fi.
Let's move on to the Metro now, Josh.
Yeah, shaky start for Farage. And this is Nigel Farage getting a milkshake thrown in his face. And this is just a very sad state of affairs that this kind of stuff still goes on. That then people on the left, you have Owen Jones sort of celebrating it and tweeting out that it was art, when Owen Jones himself was physically assaulted.
Yeah.
And people across the political spectrum, as annoying as he is, condemned it, rightly so.
Yeah.
So the hypocrisy, of course, there. And it's a shame that this is what replaces rhetoric.
Yeah.
Is this kind of... It's an assault. He doesn't know what that could have been. That could have been acid. That could have been anything.
This is the thing. I think people, do they underestimate it, or do they all know and not care? But it would really accelerate your heart rate. You would feel a real cortisol spike. And, you know, there is a danger that, obviously, that, somebody will elevate the actual contents of that milkshake at some point. But it's a deeply unpleasant thing to happen.
And if you look at the continent, and in this country as well, there's been some as well. There have been serious attacks on politicians on both sides. In Germany, I mean, just the other day, a politician or a political activist was stabbed at a rally. So, to sort of normalise attacking politicians is pretty bad. I think if anybody throws a milkshake at me, they're going to be drinking their next milkshake through a straw.
That's a good threat. I like that one.
But do you think she got through security because she was like young and pretty and blonde and?
I do think, seriously, I think he was trying to do a kind of man of the people thing, wasn't he? He's gone to Clacton, which is obviously he feels is like his, a very safe space for him. But he's not going to be short of security if this carries on. Well, I mean, I don't think he'll stop. I think he will create more of a kind of ring around him.
She's got an OnlyFans apparently. So apparently this is just to sort of promote her OnlyFans. So she's obviously used to having liquids thrown.
Well, that worked. Remember there was a fellow who tried to launch. There's a fellow who tried to launch his whole comedy career off throwing a pie in Rupert Murdoch's face.
Oh, really?
Wasn't there?
Was that Aaron Barshak?
Yeah,
the comedy terrorist. Well, I'm going to launch a thing called Only Fathers. I dress up as these women's dads, and they pay me $7.99, and I tell them that I'm proud of them and their life choices.
And they're not going out dressed like that. Finally, the Daily Star, Josh.
Asbo orcas are just like Kevin the Teenager. Supposedly in the Mediterranean, there's been a spate of yachts being sunk by these orcas, and it turns out boffins, good old boffins, have stepped in to tell us that it's basically because they're a bit bored. They're teenagers and they got nothing else to do. So that is the kind of entertainment. So they need to sort of build some youth clubs for orcas. Because they're all hanging out at the underground bus shelters under the sea, and that's what they're getting up to.
But it is. I mean, they are, by some metrics, the most intelligent animals on the planet, aren't they?
What about us?
I think. Yeah, no, but
we've got like computers and stuff.
We're like the species equivalent of the Tory government. We've had
our
these
time.
million years on Earth, and we're getting a massive downvote from the rest of the planet. I think they're going to put the killer whales in charge. They have quite a sort of human-like social organisation, don't they? Which is clearly what they're going on by here.
And they've attacked migrant boats before.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I mean,
I mean, that has got to be, if anybody was drinking at home, like, that would be, they would just be like, that's just a shock. How can you bring in migrant boats to a story about orcas?
Because they're attacking people.
Come on, get them down into the channel.
It's adding to the danger.
If we got them into the channels, I mean, that is the perfect, plausible deniability,
I did think about saying something like that.
It's not us, it's the orcas.
I don't want that getting clipped out and played in court. Look at this despicable racist, but I'm happy to see you went there.
We'd be delighted to welcome you into our nation, but the orcas ain't having it. I'm sorry, sir. That is the front page is done. Stay with us for part 2, where we have the latest wild gambles in the election. Vaccine chickens coming home to roost. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
D-Day was shrouded in secrecy. Ken Hay was days away from landing in Normandy and still didn't know what was happening.
I don't think we really appreciated what we were going into. Actually, on D-Day, I was on a 30-mile route march, and we see the planes going over and that sort of thing. And we realised that wherever they were going, then we got the news that, in fact, it was Normandy, and we knew we were scheduled for that.
He arrived on Juno Beach at Coursieux-sur-Mer a few days after the main assault. The soldiers' role was to push forward into enemy territory.
I didn't land on D-Day. I landed shortly after in June. I was in the infantry, so I was a rifle and I was up the front.
While on night patrol on July 7th, his unit was attacked.
My brother was a corporal in the same platoon, and he was out with me. He got back. 16 of us out of 30 got back. 5 of us got captured, and 9 got killed.
Germans put him to work in a POW camp in Zabas, Poland. With Soviets advancing, the prisoners were forced to march for 1,000 miles.
At one point along there, my leg was chopped. I lay down in the snow. If it hadn't been for 2 guys who fell back in the column and picked me up, I'd have just gone to sleep and frozen to death. 2 American tanks turned up on the 22nd of April, Sunday afternoon, and we were liberated.
Ken feels pride for the role he played in Normandy and thanks God for keeping him alive.
People say, why did you volunteer for the services? It was a completely different atmosphere then. You did your bit.
The People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jules and Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel. Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jules and Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, still here with Leo Kearse and Josh Howie. Telegraph first, Leo, another Tory policy shamelessly aimed at bringing the under-30s back into the fold.
Yes, the Tories are to scrap inheritance tax in a big throw of the dice, says Osborne, George Osborne, the former Chancellor.
Yeah.
But it's not really that big a throw of the dice. It's like something that's going to appeal to people who vote Tory.
Yeah. It's not going to change anyone's mind who's gone against it, but it might get some people out of the armchair, I guess.
Yeah, it might get them down to the polling station. Because it's exactly what Tories want to hear. And it is a really unfair tax because people have already paid tax on that money several times by the time they get to death. And they can't even give it to their kids. It's like, what are we, the Soviet Union?
Well, I totally agree. I don't think there should be any tax, obviously, total libertarian.
Yeah.
But it is a slightly problematic argument, that, because, you know, VAT, you could say the same thing. You've already paid income tax on your money, and then you pay further tax when you make a purchase.
Yeah. And then you pay this one as well.
Yeah, exactly. So these almost all taxes are a bit like that. I mean, I do think it's wrong. Although it doesn't kick in very low now, does it? I think it's about, was it 300,000?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I'm in two minds about this. One is it would cost a lot of money. There's a lot of money that is made for inheritance tax, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah.
On the other hand, how good health are my parents in?
Yeah, obviously. So, you can't help thinking.
Well, and so really, I would, you joked about it being for under 30s, but this is really to appeal to the kind of 40s, 50s.
I'm saying that. I was being ironic. It doesn't appeal to under 30s. People under 30s, their parents aren't going to clock it.
Yeah,
most people's parents die when they are in their 50s or 60s now.
So you think that, genuinely, that is probably who they're trying to look at.
But funnily enough, my good friend Sam Ashworth-Hayes, who I believe has appeared on the channel a couple of times, sort of economist with the Daily Telegraph, he has written about this. To some extent, it won't save them money. It will actually cost them money. It actually, you want there to be low. I mean, it will encourage people to make good investment decisions, basically, with lots of money. You want the wealthy people to invest in such a way that it benefits the economy, rather than just trying to protect, ring-fence their wealth and make sure it gets inherited. And so actually, by removing inheritance tax, you tend actually to...
That's interesting, because rich people spend their money very wisely. Like you say, they invest in the companies that are going to do well, so creating jobs and creating wealth for the whole country. Whereas governments just take money and they might as well bury it in the ground, the amount of good they do with it.
Absolutely, like Alzheimer's squirrels. That should have been an easier way of saying that. Unforgivably, I couldn't remember the word Alzheimer's. Josh, the Telegraph giveth, the Telegraph takes.
Withhold donations from parties' election campaign. This is 3 donors have given up to about 5 million in the past, with a possible 4th donor. Now, they paid £15,000 for a private polling to kind of see, because Tories are kind of been suggesting that there are polls that actually they're doing all right, maybe. And so these Tory donors have banded together and said, you know what, let's just, before we give the money, let's just test it out ourselves, because they're successful business people. And they've gone, oh, it's not looking good, we might as well just keep that behind, because obviously they want to get a knighthood.
Yeah.
And maybe their money might better be spent with Labour.
Well, you've got to worry. You've got to wonder what the thinking is behind donors. I mean, do they do it in the hope that they will move the dial, or like move the needle, encourage an election, or do they do it purely in hopes of preferment when? And
some of them do it for fun. I know one political donor who just wants to mess with the system.
So who does he donate to?
me for a bit.
Was that invested well? That money?
I don't know. I mean, I think he enjoyed it. So.
Okay.
There is that thing. What do they call it? Altruistic. What's it called? Rational altruism or something. Like basically, an organisation that will tell you which charities you should spend your money on. You save the most lives or have the most effect. They must have that equivalent thing for political donation as well. If say you have one particular thing that you want to see legislation change on. Yeah. And we can all imagine. But there must be a way of doing it rather than just kind of go give money to the Tories.
But that's what lobbying is, isn't it? A specialised form of that.
Yeah.
But
and it's insanely profitable, lobbying. Like they say, big American firms get something like over a 10,000% return on their lobbying fees. Like the amount of benefit they get.
That's what we're saying about rich people investing their money wisely.
Sunak, really, all he has to do is just ask his father-in-law. He's like, all right, I didn't get 5 million. Dad.
It's like that girl in Common People, isn't he? He just has to phone his dad, he'd make it all right. Roach climbing the wall. The Independent, Leo, the man, the Reform phones. Faiza Shaheen has quit Labour. Where will she go?
So blocked Labour candidate Faiza Shaheen has quit Labour and accuses it of a hierarchy of racism, because, of course, everything is racist these days, including the Labour Party now. So she'd been due to contest the Chingford and Woodford Green seat held by Ian Duncan-Smith, but she was told on Wednesday that the party was suspending her after she liked social media posts that criticised Israel and its actions in Gaza. So the move clears the path for her to potentially essentially stand against Labour as an independent, which, you know, seems to be a bit of an issue for Labour at this election. A lot of people are either because they're absolutely raving, lunatic, woke social justice warriors, and, you know, think that they should campaign on the basis of Gaza in this country for some reason. So they're leaving so they can, you know, be free to, you know, be as anti-Semitic as they want.
But it does work, doesn't it? I mean, that's how George Galloway got his seat, wasn't it? You know, that was a single issue thing. And obviously we've seen Allahu Akbar break out as the new slogan for the Green Party.
It's only going to work to a certain extent in certain places, obviously.
Chingford used to be Norman Tebbett's constituency. That's obviously changed a bit. I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is a Tory vote. So Ian Duncan Smith, I think, is at the moment. But I mean, when she says here, she doesn't want to contribute to a party that seems to think so little of people like me. And I think there's an allusion there to ethnicity. But it's not about that, because of course they've been ruthless. Starmer's been ruthless against the cranks, including Lloyd Russell Moyles. You know, he's a white ginger guy.
He's a ginger,
so it's not about ethnicity. It's about
unless Diane Abbott right.
Yeah, well, no, it's about Corbynite cranks. My personal theory was that Starmer, like, when he came into power, people wanted him to be decisive like that. But actually, I think he did a clever thing where he let them be cranky. A lot of them kind of almost ruled themselves out, and now it's got to the election. He's like, right, now we have to just get rid of the
and she's not even, to be fair, she stood against Ian Duncan Smith and lost. She's never been an MP, right? She was on the list. She thought she'd be in with a shout. Anyway, Josh, forget stranger danger. It's men that are the danger, according to the Met.
These are horrible statistics. Met chief says millions of men are danger to women and girls in England and Wales. And this is Sir Mark Rowley, who I'm not a massive fan of. And I'm not a fan of the way that he kind of brings this up, because there's a London policing board that's set up to determine how the Met... There's been a bunch of scandals with Met police officers in terms of attacks on women. And it seems like that's how this article reads anyway, that he's bringing up this report that hasn't come out yet, revealing the extent of violence, sexual violence and violence towards women and children, and most of it being carried out by men. And it feels like he's saying, oh, well, yes, there's lots of this police stuff, but actually it's everywhere and we can't really deal with it because there's just so much of it, and we need to think about preventative stuff, which is all true, but it feels like it's coming off him trying to kind of defend...
Squid ink, I always call this. Squid ink. He's trying to create, or like the diffuse camouflage of a zebra.
So there is a problem.
Look, there's a whole flock of zebras. You're not going to be able to catch any one of them.
There is a problem here, a massive problem that does need to be dealt with in our society, but there's also, specifically within the police force, has to be dealt with.
And it's always the tactic whenever somebody is coming. It's like very much like the bathroom row that's been going on for years. Should trans women be allowed to use the ladies' bathrooms? And they go, well, it's not trans women are the issue. It's all biological males. You go, well, yes, but you can't just like, do you know what I mean? Like totally eradicate the particulars of a case. And just kind of go, what are we going to do? What do you want to do? Like, literally castrate the entire male population?
Oh, that's their next step. They're talking about it. They're telling us we've got microplastics in our testicles and they need to come off.
Yes.
They're talking now. The Guardian published an article, I think it was yesterday, saying you live longer if you have your testicles cut off.
I did see that.
Which is going to be, it's going to be difficult for them to find testicles on Guardian readers.
It's funny, 3 years ago, I think it was, I got into an interesting row. It didn't last for very long, with a guy called Adam... Rutherfield, who's a sort of geneticist and has written books about how to argue with a racist and things like this, quite left-wing at UCL. And he was in a row with Toby Young about whether or not lockdown was good for us. And Toby Young had posted a picture of a lion in a cage, kind of saying, be careful, what happens. And Rutherford was saying, actually, caged lions live longer. I was like, you're literally saying what I think you're saying. But he kind of made out that he was tongue-in-cheek. But there is this kind of, I don't know, I mean, like, this obviously goes counter to the story, but we know that men's testosterone is roughly half what it was 50 years ago, right?
And look at the state of society as a result.
Exactly, and I'm not saying, obviously, that we need to get it back up because men, I mean, well, a lot of people would associate male violence with testosterone, but then a lot of other people would say, when you have a society with strong men in it who are willing to take on the role of a patriarch who shows young men how to behave and so on, then that's, you have a better chance of teaching men. But as I say, until you drill down into the statistics and the particularities...
And the statistics are terrible in terms of 10% of 999 calls are for domestic abuse. That's 30% of all violence. Is that what it is? Yeah. And 50% of violence suffered by women total is all about domestic violence. So this has to be dealt with.
Domestic violence, but I suppose my point is, there's always the 80-20 thing, right? The Pareto principle. 80% of the domestic violence will be 20% of the men, you know, and so on. And you just want to know a little bit more detail rather than him just going, oh, it's men, innit? What can you do?
Yeah.
You know? Leo, complex story here in the Telegraph as well. Lots of variables to unpick, but the bottom line, we were lied to by the evil lizard.
Yeah, basically. Another far-right conspiracy theory comes true. Yeah, again, what is that? We're at about 290 now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so COVID vaccines may have helped fuel a rise in excess deaths. Experts call for more research into the side effects and possible links to mortality rates. This is researchers in the Netherlands who analysed data from 47 Western countries, which must be about all of them, and discovered there are more than 3 million excess deaths, so that's deaths that wouldn't normally have occurred since 2020, with the trend continuing despite the rollout of vaccines and containment measures. So it's interesting. They say, and this is in the BMJ Public Health. This is in a proper peer-reviewed medical journal, and you know, better than the Lancet, which is not, it's not co-signed by like a Chinese funder. But yeah, it says although COVID-19 vaccines were provided to guard civilians from suffering morbidity and mortality by the COVID-19 virus, suspected adverse events have been documented as well. I mean, anyone who said this 2 years ago would have their YouTube channel taken down. You know what I mean? It was treated really seriously, so maybe we shouldn't censor people in the future. And also remember how anybody who had COVID, if they then died, even if they were hit by a bus, it was recorded as a COVID death.
With COVID.
We should do that with the vaccine. Anybody who's been vaccinated that dies, they died with the vaccine.
Yeah. You know, this is maybe slightly oblique to that, but my father-in-law died 9 years ago. He had a couple of strokes. The first one put him in hospital, and then he sort of stabilised, and then he had a second one, and he died. On his death certificate, it gave his death as prostate cancer, which he'd been living with for many years. I mean, it's not the same thing, but I don't know how important that is for statistics, but absolutely he did not die of prostate cancer. It was nothing to do with his death. And we saw that. My wife saw it and was like, that's a bit odd, but whatever, you know. You do kind of wonder. I mean, that's just the one death certificate that's a very small sample size, but...
The interesting thing for me is that reading all the papers today, this is, as far as I could tell, Telegraph was the only paper who covered this story.
Yeah.
This is a big deal. I took the vaccine, even though I'd had it at least twice, COVID.
Oh, really?
So I feel stupid going along with it. But for me, the main thing is here, let's follow the science. Everyone's always going, follow the science, let's follow the science. All right, then, well, there does seem to be some...
Not down that road.
Well, this is it. Well, that's what I'm saying. Are we allowed to follow the science in this case? Because let's get to the bottom of it. Let's actually look into this. That's what they're saying. But as long as most of our media institutions are unwilling to even sort of print an article like this, we're not going to get any answers.
Nothing in our lifetime they sowed in, you know, created so many hostages to fortune on their own front pages. We have to go to the break now, but join us after the break for news of portable knife scanners, reinforced schools and gender-neutral haircuts. What a world. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Some rain to come for parts of the southeast and the far northwest, but otherwise clear skies will develop this evening, and it's going to be a cold night. That's because this cold front is pushing south and eastwards through the rest of the evening, and behind it we've got much colder air arriving and clearer skies as well. So some rain at first this evening across the southeast, but it will turn much drier through the night. And I think most of us will see a dry and clear night away from the far northwest, where frequent, quite heavy showers will continue to push in through the night. It's going to be a much fresher start to the day tomorrow. We could be down into the low single figures rurally and the higher single figures for many towns and cities. But there will be a fair amount of sunshine around, particularly across eastern areas. So eastern Scotland could see a bright start to the day, but across the west there's a big difference across Scotland. Some frequent, very heavy, possibly thundery showers. There's a risk of some hail, possibly some hill snow across Scotland as well. Showers will continue to push into parts of northwest England, North Wales as well, but the further south and east you are, the more likely you are to stay dry through Wednesday. And I think it will stay fairly bright, particularly across the south coast into eastern areas of England as well through the day. There is a risk of the odd shower developing into more central areas of Wales, parts of the Midlands possibly by the afternoon, but it's really northern areas that will see the most frequent showers through Wednesday. But for most of us, it's going to be a much cooler day. Temperatures only reaching 11 or 12 degrees across northern areas, 16 or 17 across the south. It'll still feel fairly pleasant in the sunshine across the south, but for many of us, a cold northwesterly breeze, and that will continue as we head into Thursday as well. Another very similar day, a fresh start with showers moving in from the north and west, staying much drier though across the south and the east. Still showers to come for northern areas on Friday, but by Saturday it looks much drier and brighter and a little bit warmer.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. So, Josh, the portable knife scanners are to be trialled by the Met, and hopefully they have portable magnets as well if they need to remove them.
Very good. Police to trial portable knife scanners that detect weapons enclosed at a distance, like up to about 10 feet.
Right.
And they can sort of have this little scanner thing, and you can see if you've got a gun or a knife in you. Yeah. And this is a really good opportunity for the police to be secretly racist.
Yeah.
I think that's because there's obviously a lot of issues with
stop and search,
and the numbers constantly being on decline, but knife crime going up.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a correlation there between the two of those. And so this way, everybody's happy.
So they just go and follow the scanner.
I'm just following the scanner. Yeah. I don't know. I'm colourblind. Beep, 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 beep. I'm not looking anywhere. Oh, there's a beep, beep, beep.
So we haven't seen a picture yet, have we? So we don't know whether it's kind of X-ray vision where you can actually see the outline of the knife, or whether it's just a presence of metal around.
Do you think the police have been reading the Beano and seen an advert in the back for X-ray specs?
Exactly.
And like, this is the answer to their dreams. You can just wear these at the tube station.
Yeah.
But yeah, apparently it's a handheld device, just the size of a large mobile phone with a scanner and digital screen, which sounds amazing. Yeah, like Josh says, it's gonna everybody's gonna be happy.
Yeah.
Apart from the people with knives.
But you will. I mean, they will have to. Maybe it's a smaller threshold, but they will have to eventually step up to the person who's just been surreptitiously scanned and then demand a check.
Yeah. I mean, the weird thing, they did say something weird in this article where they said it's going to increase it from the current rate of 25% of positive stop and searches to 30%. And I'm sure they made a mistake there, because that seems like it's going to have a 5% increase. No, that doesn't make sense at all. But, all right, good.
It's all to do with Bayes' theorems, I believe. Leo, the Daily Mail have a story about US school infrastructure that puts leaky roofs into perspective.
Yeah, so American schools are being radically redesigned to prevent mass shootings and slow down gunmen if they do get inside the school. So the doors are going to be magnet locked with the push of a phone key. Every window and door has a bullet-resistant glass film, and panic buttons are everywhere. And they're making the hallways curved, so people can't shoot down them. They're also putting sort of wing walls jutting out, like you get the buttress in a church for people to hide behind. It's crazy the amount of work and the expense. Like, one school is being redesigned and it's costing $50 million. They make the walls thick so they can't be shot through, because previous gunmen have just shot through the walls in the schools. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of terrifying that. I mean, America's obviously the best country in the world, and I'd love to live there, except having kids. Yeah, it does worry me that if I put them in school.
Statistically, it is possible to exaggerate it. It's such a vivid image, a school shooting. It stays with you for months, doesn't it? And so parents are terrified. It does surprise me that this is the best way to spend the money, rather than on measures to prevent guns getting into the school in the first place. Yeah, you would kind of think that would be, you'd have a couple of pinch points with, some
they built that into it as well.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I just think it's just terrible that this level of thought has to go into saving children's lives rather than, I don't know, outlawing guns. Or whatever.
If you outlaw guns, then you end up being ruled by a tyrannical government.
Well,
arguably they already
that's
are.
what they're worried about. That's what they always say they're worried about, isn't it? That they want to get their guns back because then they have tyranny. I suspect it's because there are loads of criminals who've already got guns who won't give their guns back. I think that's what they're more worried about, seriously.
Yeah, like banning guns here doesn't stop people getting shot.
No, but
there's no school shootings.
What about the psychology of children? Does it matter, or will they get used to it after a week and just think it's funny?
I don't know. I just think that they're already. I think they're already being messed up. To be honest, I mean, they have all these not trials. What are they called? The
transitioning.
They have transitioning as well, and then they also have all these, where they like fire alarms, but for gun shooting. Drills. Drills.
Yeah. This might be quite fun. It'll be like Gaudi-esque corridors with the curves and stuff. Might make it like Willy Wonka style.
But it'll be an arms race. Somebody will develop a bullet that could keen off the side of a curved corridor. Daily Mail, there's a very sick observation. Daily Mail. A bit of a sublinical apology action going on at the BBC.
Yeah, BBC pundit forced to apologise after posting image of Rishi Sunak, President Biden and other world leaders with Hitler moustaches that labelled them the Kids Killers Union. This is a BBC pundit who is Mr. Sheikh, Qasim Sheikh. He is a former Scottish international cricketer. He's about to do his first...
term in jail?
No, he's a commentary on the BBC for cricket, and so these social media.
So they get all the skeletons out.
Yeah, they feed out now, and he said, "Oh, I'm really sorry," but he's sort of he says a thing here like this is after October 7th, saying that don't the Palestinians have a right to defend themselves? It's like, mate, rape is not resistance.
Yeah.
So this kind of.
Do you think the BBC now have a thing where they go? Well, you're going to be a commentator. Can we have your Twitter account? And then they just run it through a kind of automated, offence check, and they go that one, and that one, and that one. You're going to have to apologise for that, delete that, contextualise that. That one's 50-50. That has got to go.
I think in this case they were just checking that he tweets the same kind of stuff as Gary Lineker.
So
he's all good.
Line.
He's just perfect for the BBC.
Lockstep. Could you just use the term 30s rhetoric a bit more instead of Hitler moustache?
So I just want to say something. In 2022, he's one of the cricketers who opened up about their experiences of racism.
Oh, really?
And it's just like the hypocrisy. And one of the other cricketers as well.
Yeah.
Also, then they found out he'd been calling Jewish people online cheap and all this other stuff.
Was this the guy in Yorkshire?
No, I think there's a different guy, but this is one of the same part of the same thing here. So it's just the hypocrisy. And now what? I pay I pay my licence fee.
Yeah.
Some of that money's going to go to him.
Why do you pay your licence fee?
Because I'm a law-abiding citizen.
No, it's not against the law to not pay it.
Well, if I watch the BBC and...
You watch it on the laptop.
Well, I don't know.
Leo,
My kids
I watched
watch your
this
neighbours.
on the socials a few times last night. Nice bit of vigilante justice in the sun. Literally in the sun, in fact, in Spain, right?
So this is the dramatic moment. A furious dad punches a comedian on stage during show for making...
We've got a clip.
We've got a clip for making shock pedo comments.
Come on, let's have a look at it. It's a good cuff. Come.
Estos los comentarios pedófilos que ha hecho de mi hijo, Dime a los comentarios de mi hijo, Basura. Ahora, ¿Qué decías que iba a comer un negro? Mi hijo que iba a comer pollas, Con 3 meses,
And we're back on air. We were all doing that.
It doesn't seem that funny. It wasn't that funny to me.
So that was Spanish comedian Jamie Caravaca, who's in the middle of his show in Madrid on Monday night when an enraged attacker interrupted his performance and punched him on the side of the head. They say it's a heavy blow here, but it clearly wasn't.
It was a cuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a cuff. And, I'm not normally in favour of comedians getting punched in the head while on stage, but this guy, the fat guy who got punched, the comedian...
With his leg up, the one with his leg up.
The one getting punched, he posted some absolutely horrific, obscene, paedophilic comments about the guy's baby, and the guy's they call him a far right activist, which means he's a normal guy probably. Just a regular dad. You know what I mean? Like he posted a picture of his son saying how proud he was and stuff, and this horrible left-wing comedian comes along and posts the paedophile. I'm amazed the dad didn't kill him with a hammer, to be honest.
This is the kind of thing I was talking about, where you need a bit of testosterone so that men are men, and defend their families.
That fat guy needs some testosterone, then he'll stop stop being a paedophile.
I wonder if he'll do good for his career because, of course, Jim Jeffries, that's what broke him.
That's
that,
true.
That whole
Bit of
punch
CCTV
at
from
the comedy store.
Yeah.
That's what made him.
And also, paedophilia is very popular on the left these days. So.
Let's not imply that Jim Jeffries has anything like that.
No.
He was just punched. There was no...
There's no babies.
It was just a bad joke. Josh, gender-neutral haircuts in the Telegraph, and as long as the banter doesn't follow suit, I don't mind.
Oh, God. Hairdressing chain... I mean, oh, God, not your link. More about this story. Hairdressing chain Headmasters, I've never heard of, makes every day a gender-neutral hair day. So there are two elements to this. It feels like there is something here to be said. You know, men who have long hair, women who have short hair... If they should be charged accordingly, but whereas typically women, regardless of their hairstyle, are charged more. Yeah. So it makes sense to make it fair in that way, but to make it about this sort of gender identity rubbish is annoying.
It's tiresome. And also, this is one of the few hairdressers, it's called Headmasters or something, where they presumably they are open to both. But in reality, men and women generally go to different establishments anyway, don't they?
Yeah, because it's too expensive in these places.
It's been many years. It's been too many years.
It's 40 quid for a man's haircut in this place. And also, they're just overcomplicating it. Instead of saying men's and women's, they're saying, like, you know, this is a cut and blow dry instead of a ladies cut and blow dry. It's like, I remember being at the Adelaide Comedy Festival, and they had on the toilets, they had, these are gender-neutral toilets, but this one contains tampon dispensers. This is a gender-neutral toilet, but it contains urinals. It's like, just say men and women. It's like, why are you making me read an essay before I go into the men's or go, like, you know, everybody knows.
Pan-urinary can.
Yeah, I'm going to boycott them.
Good for you. That's boycott is a different thing again. That's the end of part 3. Join us in the final section for space germs, no sex please, it's match day, and an app that lets you speak to the dead. See you in a couple of minutes.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
How prevalent is it in those with darker skin, like me?
That's a great question, and it's one that we get a lot. So your skin tone does affect your risk of skin cancer. People at the most risk are people with lighter skin tones, so light-coloured hair and eyes as well, lots of moles and freckles, a history of sunburn or a family history of skin cancer. But people with darker skin tones can still burn and can still get skin cancer. Anybody can get skin cancer. So I would encourage everybody, regardless of your ethnicity or your skin tone, to think really seriously about taking care when it's sunny. That myth that you've mentioned that black people can't get skin cancer is really prevalent, and that's something I want to dispel right now immediately. Because more black people think maybe they can't get skin cancer, that might mean that when they spot something unusual for them, they're less likely to go to the doctor and they're diagnosed later. And when you're diagnosed later, your outcomes do tend to be worse.
So the figures are disturbing that more people are getting skin cancer. But what about outcomes? I mean, if you do get skin cancer, what are your prospects?
So yeah, like you say, this research is a mixed picture. We're seeing incidence, so the number of new cases going up, which is not good news. But there is some good news in that mortality, so whether you're going to die or not, is actually going down. And we think that's partly due to early diagnosis, which I just mentioned is so important. But also research has led to better and kinder treatments, which mean the outcomes are likely to be better. So now, if you're diagnosed at the earliest stage, stage 1, with melanoma, actually around 9 in 10 people will survive their disease for 5 years or more.
The People's Channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jules and Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to the final section of Headliners. Leo, over to the Mail and the latest on the crucial decisions facing Gareth Southgate. In fact, come to think of it, a Southgate would be a good name for a chastity belt.
Very good, very good. So this is the science of sex bans. Is why stopping wags, that's wives and girlfriends, from visiting the England team really could help their Euro 2024 chances. Apparently, a ban on having sex has traditionally been thought to improve players' stamina and focus because they're not all relaxed from orgasming. But they do studies here. The squads from Russia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Chile, Mexico were all told to refrain from sex, while other teams were allowed to have sex, and it was the ones who had sex who took first place. And the rules for different countries are quite interesting. So not all night for the French, nothing acrobatic for the Brazilians. This is official advice they got from the managers. And for the Nigerian team, they're told only with wives, not with girlfriends.
Well, I mean, I imagine these are all sort of culturally related, aren't they? Or I suppose the Brazilian one, they just don't want to twist an ankle or something. But there are just too many variables, aren't there? For it to
there are, but there was one study where they studied some Israeli players, and it did prove that over a season, their speed decreased by about 0.5 kilometres an hour on the pitch after having sex the night before.
So if they were allowed to have sex, they became less
speedy, which is interesting. But there's all these different theories. What they don't cover here is any gay sex.
Right.
They don't also cover like women having
gay sex between two players, including
that could be a massive detrimental impact. But also they don't discuss women who've had sex before their performance.
No, bars.
Whatever, yeah.
Boyfriends and husbands, abs.
Yeah. So, but the idea is, less testosterone.
Yeah.
It relaxed, but then some people say it relaxes you. I like to have sex just before coming on Headliners, and that is why I'm so at ease here.
That's why I'm chafed.
Horrible imagery there. The viral frontier now, Josh, with the Telegraph getting antsy. I'm sure these used to be called spores.
Yeah, well, so the viral frontier, NASA told act now to tackle pathogens in space. The idea being, of course, that we may be eventually leaving our solar system. But actually, it's quite a big article. But what is really interesting is out in space, because there's more radiation, there's the opportunity for diseases to sort of mutate quicker. So if an astronaut goes up, if they've got the cold or something and it mutates and then they bring it back down to Earth...
It's a super cold.
Hello, new plot for a film.
Incredible Hulk cold.
Type thing, yeah. So that seems to be the real danger, as opposed to pathogens from outer space, which wouldn't be used to this environment and would probably die in.
Although there is a theory that we are all descended from a pathogen from outer space, right? That's the origin of life, rather than it being a spark in the...
I'm descended from Adam and Eve.
Of course you are. Absolutely right, yes. You're going with a Nigerian angle. Do you have a fear of pathogens from space here?
Not really, but it's interesting that pathogens, when they go into space, they mutate quicker, because also time, there's some sort of time dilation where if you come back, everybody's old.
Oh, yeah, like in Planet of the Apes, where hundreds of years go by and we move on to an entirely new regime.
Yeah, and apparently even when you travel in a plane, like, you get there's a minute, unnoticeable time dilation.
Yeah, but if you do it over a long enough period of time, like the stewardesses...
Is that why they look a bit older?
Support stockings. Leo, Independent and the boffins have found another tiny little bud of happiness they can snip off, and funnily enough, it's plane-based.
So there's calls for airlines to stop selling alcohol on flights. So airlines should consider restricting or stopping the access to alcohol on flights to protect the health of passengers. Academics, boring academics with nothing in their staff room, have said that they say the combination appears to lower blood oxygen and increase heart rate, even amongst younger adults, and that's bad for you apparently. But yeah, it's bad for you, but it's fun. I love getting drunk on a plane. You get drunk like straight away. It's like being 15 again. It's like one little sip of something and you're
exactly
like,
right. I think it is is possible to get drunk more quickly than you intended to on planes.
Yeah.
Maybe there should be some little kind of, I don't know, like a little step that you have to kind of break.
Yeah, that's why I fly. I don't actually. I just get on the return flight and come back again. Go there, get drunk.
Just for the elevated.
Yeah, get there, come back.
Like altitude training for an alcoholic. Yeah, but no, it is. But it's so boring on planes, isn't it? Without alcohol, and so much fun with. Insane academics. Clothing news now in the Mail. I imagine you're as passionate about dress sizes being as a bit more inclusive.
Indeed, yeah. So Rixo, which is supposed to be some quite successful clothing company, is slammed by disappointed fans over a new collection that doesn't go above a UK size 14 after founders previously pledged to be more inclusive. This is because in their normal range they go up to size 20, whatever, I don't really know.
30.
30, really.
Although
so
I
big,
don't know where it starts.
Super big, fat, yeah, sort of baby reindeer size. And now they've done this collab, like a collaboration with the famous, but those aren't going up that high. And lots of, I guess, fat women are complaining about it. But what's interesting is it's not inclusive. The prices are like up to like about 300 quid, 200, 300 quid.
Yeah.
That's not inclusive, number one. But number two is, if it is like a difference between a 14 and a 30, size 30, surely that's double the material, which means that they should be charging like double for a fat dress.
It's like the Garrick Club of couture, isn't it? It's like everyone's going to let women in, let men in, but it's you're being priced out to begin with anyway.
Yeah, and the whole point of fashion is like it's not everybody can afford it, not everybody can fit into it. So
No,
and it's
exactly.
like, you know, demanding that they make this dress, this stylish dress that you can fit into. It's like demanding they make a Ferrari you can take a horse in.
Exactly. Elitism is the feature, not the bug. The show is nearly over. We're all available, incidentally, if any designers want us to model their outfits. The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. The Daily Mail, fiery Rishi comes out swinging and lands big blows. The Guardian, leaders clash on migration, tax and NHS. In ill-tempered debate, the Financial Times, Indian voters deliver shock to Modi after ruling BJP fails to win majority. The Mirror, these are all good men, our D-Day veteran heroes. The Metro, shaky start for Farage. A lot of people impressed by the photography. And finally, the Daily Star, Asbo Orcas are just like Kevin the Teenager. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thanks to my guests, Leo and Josh. Andrew Doyle is back tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Stephen Allen and Lewis Schaefer. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, good night.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Some rain to come for parts of the southeast and the far northwest, but otherwise clear skies will develop this evening, and it's going to be a cold night. That's because this cold front is pushing south and eastwards through the rest of the evening, and behind it we've got much colder air arriving and clearer skies as well. So some rain at first this evening across the southeast, but it will turn much drier through the night. And I think most of us will see a dry and clear night away from the far northwest, where frequent, quite heavy showers will continue to push in through the night. It's going to be a much fresher start to the day tomorrow. We could be down into the low single figures rurally and the higher single figures for many towns and cities. But there will be a fair amount of sunshine around, particularly across eastern areas. So eastern Scotland could see a bright start to the day, but across the west there's a big difference across Scotland. Some frequent, very heavy, possibly thundery showers. There's a risk of some hail, possibly some hill snow across Scotland as well. Showers will continue to push into parts of northwest England, North Wales as well, but the further south and east you are, the more likely you are to stay dry through Wednesday. And I think it will stay fairly bright, particularly across the south coast into eastern areas of England as well through the day. There is a risk of the odd shower developing into more central areas of Wales, parts of the Midlands possibly by the afternoon, but it's really northern areas that will see the most frequent showers through Wednesday. But for most of us, it's going to be a much cooler day. Temperatures only reaching 11 or 12 degrees across northern areas, 16 or 17 across the south. It will still feel fairly pleasant in the sunshine across the south. But for many of us, a cold northwesterly breeze, and that will continue as we head into Thursday as well. Another very similar day, a fresh start with showers moving in from the north and west, staying much drier, though, across the south and the east. Still showers to come for northern areas on Friday, but by Saturday, it looks much drier and brighter and a little bit warmer.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've got summer sewn up with an incredible trio of treats, and you could win them. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. Fun in the sun could be on us. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening and welcome. On tonight's show, as the Tories announce a cap on migrant visas, I'll be joined by Policing Minister Chris Philp, and ahead of tonight's leaders' debate, Labour's Liz Kendall. We'll also be discussing Nigel Farage being milkshaked on the campaign trail in Clacton. Imagery there of that quite shocking moment, and we'll be speaking about Labour's energy plans. Will Great British Energy work? This is Vote 2024, the people decide. Lots to come on tonight's show, but first, here's the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Camilla, thank you and good evening to you. Well, Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer are going head-to-head tonight in the first TV debate of the general election campaign. The cost of living, migration and defence, all expected to be points of contention tonight. And that comes as a YouGov poll suggests Labour is on course for a historic landslide with a 194-seat majority. Meanwhile, up to 6 Conservative candidates are reported to be weighing up whether or not to defect to Reform UK. The candidates, including at least one former MP in the last Parliament, have to decide by Friday when nominations must be in. One told us that Rishi Sunak's performance in tonight's leaders' debate with Sir Keir Starmer will impact his decision. Meanwhile, a 25-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of assault after Nigel Farage had a milkshake drink thrown all over him. The new Reform UK leader was leaving a pub in Essex after launching his election campaign in Clacton-on-Sea. Party chairman Richard Tice said Reform won't be bullied, while the Conservatives and Labour have both roundly called it unacceptable behaviour. Elsewhere on the campaign trail, the Liberal Democrats have been promoting their plans for social care today, and the Conservatives are pledging to give MPs a vote on the number of migrants who'll be allowed UK visas. However, the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, has refused to confirm the exact cap they would put on worker and family visas if they get back into power.
If we are returned to government, we have committed to a scheme to cap the level of work-related visas. The Migration Advisory Committee will crunch the numbers to balance the economic needs of the country against the pressure on public services and suggest to the government a level.
James Cleverly. Meanwhile, the total number of illegal migrants who've arrived in the UK so far this year is now more than 10,500. That's up 38% on 2023. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, blames the Conservatives for the rising numbers.
The Conservatives have let immigration get out of control. We've got record numbers of people coming to this country, and they've now said they're going to have a visa cap. They've not said what the number is, so they've got a visa cap without a cap. We did have a visa cap before. Rishi Sunak argued to get rid of it, which they did in 2020, and now they're going back to it but without a number. It is utter chaos.
And that comes as more than 200 migrants arrived in the UK on small boats this morning. Now, major hospitals in London have declared a critical incident after a cyber attack. It's led to the cancellation of operations today and the loss of blood transfusions. Staff at King's College Hospital and Guy's and Thomas's, including the Royal Brompton, all been told their sites have been hit by what is being described by some as a ransomware attack. 3 injured military horses who bolted through central London during a training exercise in April are, we're told, making a remarkable recovery now. The Army says Trojan, Tennyson and Vanquish are all back on duty and are expected to take part in the Trooping the Colour ceremony next week. The remaining 2 injured horses, Vida and Quaker, are enjoying, let's call it a summer holiday. If you're watching on television, you can see them there in buttercup-laden fields, but hoping to return to work soon. That's the news. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on the screen, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, welcome back to Vote 2024 with me, Camilla Tominey. Lots to get through tonight. We're going to be discussing immigration. We've had the Tory plan for a migrant cap, although they won't give us a figure on what it should be capped to. We've also got Labour saying that they'll bring down the numbers, but again, they won't set a target. And we've got Reform suggesting that migration should be at net zero. So we'll be discussing all that a little later in the show. We're also going to be discussing, of course, Nigel Farage being milkshaked on the campaign trail in Clacton. Not the first time he's had a drink thrown at him. This was the scene there earlier today as a girl walked up to him, threw a milkshake and then walked away. And we're, of course, going to be discussing tonight's TV debate. And actually, we'll cover all of those subjects and more, I hope, with Chris Philp, who's the policing minister. He's the prospective Tory candidate for Croydon South as well. Chris, lovely to see you this morning. This evening.
Good evening, Camilla.
I'm used to doing the show in the morning. My whole day has been discombobulated by being on screen. Right, let's start, first of all. Farage might not be somebody that you particularly like or admire, but at the same time, he shouldn't be being attacked with a milkshake on the campaign trail, should he?
No, he certainly shouldn't. No one running for elected office should be attacked like that, presumably by some kind of deranged lefty. You know, in the last 9 years that I've been an MP, 2 of my colleagues, one Labour, one Conservative, have been murdered. So we have to take this seriously. The way we decide things in this country is through reasoned debate, discussion, argument, being questioned by the media. We don't do politics by acts of violence, and throwing a milkshake at someone is one end of a spectrum that has a very, very dark endpoint, and that's why I'm very glad police have made arrests. We should have zero tolerance for that kind of thing.
It's worrying, isn't it? Because that person got quite close. You all have to be out and about amongst the public. That's the whole point of an election campaign, right? You're shaking hands, you're cuddling the proverbial babies, you're knocking on doors, you are quite exposed.
In many ways...
We're lucky it was milkshake in that cup is what I'm saying, I suppose, Chris.
That's right. I mean, political candidates do expose themselves to the public, as they should. I mean, the whole point of an election and the whole point of being in public service is to meet people the whole time, talk to people, listen. I always listen to people in Croydon, what they're saying, and then take that, obviously, back to Parliament. And that's why this kind of incident is troubling. I've seen another colleague, Mike Freer from Finchley, had his constituency office burned down just a few months ago, who then decided to step down. Anymore. That's right.
Can we talk about the Farage factor? I mean, obviously, the commentariat today and indeed the polls seem to reflect this idea that it's going to be apocalyptic for the Conservatives now to have Nigel Farage back in the hot seat for reform and running for that seat. It is difficult, this, isn't it? I mean, you're being squeezed in the polls as it is. You had that disastrous MRP poll, which suggests you're going to be reduced to 140 seats. That would be worse than in 1906. And yet that poll was conducted before Farage announced his candidacy.
Well, let's start with Nigel Farage. I mean, Nigel Farage, I think, has run for Parliament now 7, 8 times, I've lost track, and has lost on every occasion. He, ran in a similar way to this in 2015, didn't win a single seat when it was UKIP, and I think most pollsters, most commentators would say that Reform are not going to win a single MP in this election.
And yet polling does suggest he's more popular with Conservative voters than Rishi Sunak. That's a massive problem for you, isn't it?
Well, the point I was going to make is that given that Reform are not going to win any MPs, if people are Conservative-minded, like as I am, then if anyone votes for Reform, they are simply risking letting Labour win more and more MPs, giving Keir Starmer the keys to number 10 Downing Street. And we know that Keir Starmer has absolutely no interest whatsoever in controlling immigration. He's got no interest at all in personal liberty or controlling taxation.
Can you make that point on immigration when 2 million people have come into this country in the last Parliament alone under the Conservatives? That was following a manifesto in 2019 which pledged to keep immigration down and take back control of our borders. We all remember that Boris Johnson-esque slogan. What's happened? I mean, this is why you're behind in the polls. It's one of the main reasons, isn't it? You failed to control immigration, both legal and illegal.
Well, firstly, on the numbers, many of those, for example, came from Ukraine. That was a couple of 100,000. Many from Hong Kong, fleeing the Chinese Communist Party, who we welcomed here. Okay. But we do agree that immigration needs to go down a lot lower. And in fact, even before today's announcement, we took action last year to, for example, significantly raise the salary threshold you've got to earn before you can come here. We're saying that if you're coming to study or working on a social care visa, you can't bring spouses or dependents with you. Now, those measures will reduce the number of people eligible to come here by 300,000 a year. That is a huge reduction. And let me finish, Camilla. We're seeing that take effect already because in the first 3 months of this year, 2024, January, February, March, we saw the number of visa applications down by 25%. So we've taken action already because immigration does need to be a lot lower.
People will rightly ask themselves, why are you having to undo your own policies? This has happened over the course of the last 14 years. OK, there's a statistic to suggest that in the 25 years leading up to 1997, net migration is around 60, 70,000 a year. It's subsequently, in the next 25 years, gone up to 5.1 million, I think it is. That's a 100-fold increase. We associate that with sort of Tony Blair's era, but the Conservatives have continued it. That's one of the reasons you're being punished. I mean, why do you think, for instance, that Rishi Sunak, with everything that you've been announcing, national service, cap on migrant visas, tax cut in the form of a national insurance reduction, why isn't it cutting through? Why aren't the polls shifting for Rishi Sunak?
Well, let's see. We're 4 weeks away from an election. As I say, on the migration numbers, we've taken decisive action already that's going to reduce it by 300,000. That's happening already. On the boats, we said today, I think if we're re-elected, the first Rwanda flight is now firmly scheduled for the 24th of July. And we know the deterrent effect of sending people somewhere like Rwanda does work. We saw it work in Australia about 10 years with their Operation Sovereign Borders. So there is a clear plan. And I think as this election campaign unfolds, we're right at the beginning of it now. We've got 4 weeks, I think just over 4 weeks to go. We will see movement. I think the debate tonight is going to be important. People will see Keir Starmer has essentially no idea. He's got a blank sheet of paper. He will say whatever he thinks he needs to say to get elected. You saw him on that clip then, claiming to be tough on immigration when, as a left-wing lawyer, he was the one that was insinuating that immigration laws were somehow racist. It was the Labour Party Party, who voted 139 times in the last Parliament against our immigration laws.
Why not
and let me
put
finish.
a cap on the numbers then? Why not give a target? Because you could have scored a win there against Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, who on my show on Sunday refused to put a target on it. And I think people watching and listening to this will say, well, if you don't put a target on it, then you can't control immigration, really. You need a kind of... You can say to yourself, look, immigration is a good thing, but we've had too much of a good thing. Therefore, we're going to cap the numbers at, say, 200,000. Why don't you put a cap on it and say what that cap is to give the public reassurance that you can control this issue?
Well, some numbers I can give are the measures we've taken already, the higher salary threshold, banning the dependents and spouses for students and for care workers. That's going to reduce the number by 300,000. So that's a firm number that your listeners and your viewers can take to the bank straight away. In terms of the new announcement, the cap, we're going to consult with the Migration Advisory Committee, because we do need higher skilled... I think higher skilled people, it's reasonable to have them come in. So things like, you know, doctors, IT professionals, finance professionals, research scientists, those are the kind of people that I think we should be welcoming. We'll consult with the Migration Council to work out what the right number is. Parliament will vote on it. They'll put a cap on it. That cap will reduce every single year, but we need to go through that exercise to work out what it is. But the number you can take to the bank is the measures we've taken already, we've legislated for, they're in law already, 300,000 reduction, and that is happening already as we speak.
All right, Chris Philp, I'll let you get back to the good people of Croydon South.
I'm off there now to knock on some doors.
All right, good man. Thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. So Nigel Farage is standing as Reform's UK candidate in Clacton. Here is a full list of the people who have declared their candidacy in the constituency so far. We've got Jovan Owusu-Nipal, who's for the Labour Party, Natasha Osborne, who's for the Green Party, Giles Watling is the Conservative Party candidate, Matthew Bensalem is for the Liberal Democrats, and as I say, that's the list of candidates. It's not finalised as the deadline isn't until later this week. It will also be published on the GBNews website once it is finalised. Well, Jonathan Porters, the Professor of Economics and Public Policy at King's College London, joins me now to discuss the immigration debate. Professor, thank you for your time this evening. In general terms, do you agree that legal migration is too high at the moment?
No. I think it has been very high over the last couple of years, but as your previous guest said, that is partly temporary factors, refugees, and the recovery after the pandemic, which led to shortages in various sectors. It is, as he and others have also said, and I pointed out, now coming down very sharply. You need to look at this over a period of several years, how the system works for the UK, its economy, society as a whole. So it is coming down of its own accord. It's natural that it should fluctuate up and down in recent years. But overall, we need immigration. It's good for the economy overall. And in particular, the people who've come over the last couple of years, most of them are in fact working. They contributed essentially all of the employment growth that we've seen since relative to before the pandemic, partly, of course, because we've had problems getting, with sickness and disability among people who are already here. They're boosting the economy. They're funding public services because they pay in more in tax revenue than they take out. And if we reduce immigration too sharply, the next government will be faced with a choice as how to respond to that. Are they going to put up taxes or are they going to cut public services?
Professor, just explain that correlation between immigration and a boost to the economy, because there are some that might argue that because growth has effectively flatlined for quite a long time now, and indeed even the OBR forecasts aren't particularly generous when it comes to future growth for Great Britain, that's aligned with a large amount of immigration. I cited that figure of 2 million people having come into the country in the last Parliament alone. So some people might say, well, immigration doesn't equate to economic growth, but you'll probably argue there are other factors for that flatlining.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Immigration is absolutely not a silver bullet. There are all sorts of other things going on. We've had, frankly, a set of fairly incoherent and damaging economic policies over the past few years. But too sharp a cut in immigration certainly would, as the OBR has also said, and the OBR has quantified the impact it would have on growth on the public finances. And a very sharp cut in immigration, in their view and indeed in mine, would lead to this big hole in tax revenues, hence requiring tax rises or public service cuts.
On the other hand, though, Prof, there is an also cogent argument to suggest that if the OBR bakes in that forecast of around 330,000 people coming into the country a year, and we haven't got the infrastructure to make up for that, we're not building enough houses, and indeed there's already strains on the NHS doctors and dentist appointments, then it's going to be difficult to sustain that level.
Well, that's right. But of course, that 330,000 represents a pretty significant fall. So we have, as we discussed before, that fall is already in some sense baked in. But remember, we have to pay for things like the NHS and we have to staff things like the NHS. And so for the NHS, for example, when you have relatively young migrants coming in who tend to work, often in the NHS in care, they're putting more in to both the financing and the staffing of the NHS than they are taking out. In fact, if we hadn't had that large influx of people for the health and social care sector over the past couple of years, the whole thing really almost certainly would have fallen apart completely.
OK, Professor Jonathan Portes, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about the TV debate now, which is coming up in over an hour, about 90 minutes' time. And let's bring into the conversation broadcasting legend and GB News' own Alistair Stewart. Big Al, I hope you can hear me. Now, I know that you, of course, hosted the first ever TV debate back in 2010. We remember it for one phrase, or at least I remember it for one phrase, "I agree with Nick," which was uttered 3 times by Gordon Brown. Do you know what? I went back to the transcript and searched for it because I wanted to know how many times the then Labour leader said it in reference to this clegmania that developed after this particular debate. But what's your abiding memory of that night, Alistair?
My abiding memory of that night, ironically, is Dave Cameron, who I knew quite well and have liked a long time. He used to work at Carlton Television. And at the back of my mind, I was utterly convinced that Gordon would come out as the kind of quasi-academic, which he is. He was a brilliant young student. Nick, I didn't really know terribly much, but I expected Gordon to be a bit cold and inarticulate, and I was right on that. But Dave looked to me to be quite frightened, whether it was because Nick came on glowing with a kind of charisma and Gordon was slightly more lively than perhaps we'd all anticipated. But the other thing I'd underline, and I mentioned this to a number of people, is the day after I remember I agree with Nick, his rating and that of the Liberal Democrats shot up. But on polling day itself, it was about where it was immediately before this debate, which folk at home watching on television are seeing, and those listening on radio, I hope, are hearing. The other thing, just while we look at that image, is there was a fantastic audience there, and about 11 of them had questions to ask on the economy, on housing,